Stewardship is the topic for this conversation, and my guest for this interview is Howard Dahl. Howard is a Christ follower whose life is marked by love for and service to others. Howard is a husband, a father, and a grandfather, and 3 of his children are enrolled here at Capstone Classical Academy in Fargo, North Dakota. Howard is an international leader in the agriculture equipment manufacturing industry, and he also serves on several boards, including the Luis Palau Association, the Trinity Forum, and the Ethics and Public Policy Center in Washington, D.C. My name is Tom Tucker. I'm Director of Advancement for Capstone Classical Academy. Howard, thanks so much for joining me for the conversation. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you with me today.
Good to be here, Tom.
Thanks, Howard. When you think of the word stewardship, what comes to heart? What comes to mind?
I grew up with hearing in my home church that stewardship is time, talent, and treasure. And I really think all 3 are equally important. And when you're young, you have more time than treasure. When you get old like me, you have more treasure than time. And so your thoughts about it are different. But I heard somebody maybe 20 years ago say a better word than time, talent, and treasure, the 3 T's, is life. And the word life was labor. I'll skip the word I first, but finances and expertise. So L, F, and E are labor, finance, so time, talent, treasure. But they said one of the greatest stewardship issues we have is our influence. As you get older, you know a lot of people. And so the stewardship over your influence. And so I get asked by many people, would you introduce me to so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so? And for the right circumstances, I can have a significant role in making an introduction. And so I guess in the last year, one of my main interesting dimensions of life has been connecting the dots or connecting people because of that role of knowing somebody that I think you should meet, so-and-so. Mm-hmm. But all relates to, we are going to give an account to God for all of these areas. And so there's a book, actually, there's a lecture this afternoon on the Trinity Forum, and the book is called Stewards, Not Owners. And I love that title of the book. We're not owners of what we have, but we're stewards if we see things properly.
Great perspective. You have a long history of giving. What motivates you to give?
I guess early on, if you're a Christ follower and you just let the word speak to you, if Jesus is really speaking to your heart, and you have the heart of Jesus, you just, it's going to overflow. I mean, it can't help but overflow. And you, if you're a Christ follower, Jesus is going to have you think of others. And that stewardship, again, of time, I'm going to give of my time to others, and I'm going to give of my money. Now, in my case, I had a wife that was far more passionate about this than I was. She brought me along year after year after year in this journey. And even as a young couple without many resources, her passion was that even at that stage we gave 15% of our income. And even when we had nothing, it was just, that was, in her mind, a minimum. The classic teaching on tithe, that was unacceptable to her. And so I would say Anne had just continually shaping and bringing me along in her more radical view of stewardship.
What seemed radical to you at the time, I'm sure, and maybe not so much right now. You bring your wife Anne into the conversation here, and for many years, you and Anne together have given to so many charities, not only here in the Fargo-Moorhead Metro, but certainly throughout the region, around the country, and around the world, including charitable causes and ministries in Ukraine and Russia, most notably. At our annual Capstone Colloquium, you announced that Capstone Classical Academy is the ministry to which you give the largest percentage of your charitable gifts. And we're very grateful for that. And so I guess my question is, why is that the case?
A couple things. There's no other capital campaigns that, generally a capital campaign, if you're deeply involved with a group, it takes more sizable gifts. And at this stage, and we have a number of groups that we just have ongoing, in some cases 30-year commitments to. And we love Capstone, and have, part of it is my grandkids here. There's no question that's a big part of it, but I just have this deep belief that formation of the next generation is so critical, and our country's in such a mess right now that, as I think I said at the banquet, there's going to be individuals coming out of the school that can be world changers. The influence they can have, it can be dramatic. And so investing in young minds, there's nothing that I think is more important.
What is it about classical Christian education that causes you to be such an ardent proponent of the approach?
Well, the words that are used here so often, goodness, truth, and beauty. And I think I could argue when Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, there's semblance of all of that in those words, Jesus being full of grace and truth. There are a lot of Christians that are full of grace but not truth. And Christians who are full of truth and not grace. And I think if you really understand properly both the gospel and the classical view of education, we need to make understanding of the whole world, and we need to be really good listeners and thoughtful people to understand the world. But a lot of us have too many opinions that are ill-informed. And a great classical education will give you a sense of how we got to where we are. So really what Western civilization is, the weaknesses, the strengths, and it takes a lot of hard work to take time to think through that.
It certainly does. You talk about maybe kids coming out of the school eventually being world changers. When you think about the potential impact of a classical Christian school like Capstone and the impact that potentially we can have on the metro here and beyond, what do you see?
I think it'll make other schools around better. I think, I guess it's something I shouldn't worry about, but I worry that Capstone, if it does really, really well, which I think it will, it's going to have to turn down a lot of students who would like to come here. And I fear it becoming an elite place where getting in is like getting into an Ivy League school. If indeed keeping the class sizes small and others see how well the students do here. So I shouldn't worry about that, but it's just something that I've thought about. But the standards of, and I think Dorothy Sayers' great essay, The Lost Art of Learning, captures so well, the beauty of a classical education. And so I think other schools will probably look at what we're doing here and say there's some elements there that we should try to incorporate into our school.
Well, since I've been involved with the school, it's become very apparent to me that there are a lot of eyes on the school right now here in our community, and certainly around the country and around the nation. We've had many conversations with administrators and parent groups around the country saying, hey, I'm really liking what I'm seeing, what's happening with you here in Fargo. we want to do that as well. We want to emulate what you're doing. We want to take a similar approach. Any thoughts or insights or advice for others in other parts of the country who might be having these thoughts right now?
Well, it's funny you should make that point. I am on the board of the Ethics and Public Policy Center, which includes some of the most thoughtful Christians, both Protestant and Catholic. There may be some Orthodox scholars as well. But at our meeting last October in Florida, we started talking about classical Christian education, and there were probably 17 or 18 scholars there that made presentations, and at least 6 of them had children in classical schools. And when I told them about Capstone being just an idea, like 4 years ago, and now what's going on, they couldn't believe it. I mean, it was startling for them, that how quickly Capstone has come to where it is. And but all were champions, and I think I forget the number, but it's large number of classical Christian schools that are starting each year. So there's a sense, there's a movement that is captivating the hearts of a lot of people throughout the country.
Yeah, it's been, I think, surprising. Head spinning is frequently a phrase or a term that comes to mind when I think about how this school has come together in terms of the speed, the rapidity, the incredible community support, without which this would not be possible. When it comes to the Fargo-Moorhead Metro, how would you rate or describe the local culture or attitude toward charitable giving and philanthropy?
Well, I think it's an unusual community. We have, and I could name a bunch of names, but I have a lot of people I know very well that are very, very generous, and I think that tradition has been here for quite a while, but I think it's just accelerating. I think there's whether it's churches, whether it's a New Life Center type causes, so many different causes. There's just a heart for making the community a better place, and we have a lot of churches that are thriving. I know a lot of churches. I'm familiar with raising money for their various projects, and so it's. I think community-wide there's a spirit of generosity, and I would argue it flows from a Christian conviction in most people's part.
I'm relatively new to this area. As you know, we've been here for going on our 4th year now, and I personally was just very surprised to learn about the resources and the capacity that are here in the Metro, and just the spirit of generosity that is here in this part of the upper Midwest. It's kind of surprising to me, and I think it is surprising for a lot of other people as well when they kind of realize what exists here and the things that are happening here.
Yeah, it's a special place, and I've traveled a lot, and this is a special community.
What would you say to other members of our community to encourage and motivate them to give to nonprofits such as Capstone or maybe some other charitable ventures?
Here's where the balance of time and money. I like to give to where I can also have some time involvement. There's some things I give to that I have no time involvement, but giving your expertise in your time can be so important. And so I think most people that in our community that are generous, whether it's the symphony or Plains Art Museum or whatever, they are involved personally as well as giving of their treasure, and so both are important. But you have to have a heart for something to give. I love Jesus' statement, "Where your treasure is, your heart will be also." And so I maintain I can know about somebody's heart by looking at their checkbook. And if I look at their checkbook, I can tell whether their heart is generous or not. And I think statistically, the average giving of all people in the country is about 3%. And I think if we look at somebody's checkbook, we're going to see where their heart is.
I think your heart and the heart of your wife, Ann, are in a lot of places. As we mentioned, not only here locally, but around the country. When you look back at some of your charitable involvements and some of the giving that you've done, what are some of the things that really stand out for you in terms of highlights that you really feel good about?
Well, both feeling great and sorrow. We were privileged to be part of the first Christian liberal arts school in the former Soviet Union in Moscow, the Russian American Christian University. And it was a major part of our giving and life for a number of years. And then Putin made it impossible for the school to continue, and so we were forced to shut down. We built a beautiful building, and in 2009, we basically had to shut down the school. So it was like the highs and lows at the same time, but seeing these amazing students thriving and getting exposed to the best of a Christian liberal arts education. We tried to always have a balance between evangelism and missions, a certain percentage of our giving there, world relief, and above all people, cared deeply about the least of these. And so whether it was Charity Water, World Vision, Samaritan's Purse, and others, but so we sort of had a disciplined approach to giving in buckets. And then our local community, we wanted to support the arts and some other areas in our local, so we tried to have a balance, but we had one rule: we wanted to only give cheerfully, and we did not want to have donor fatigue, and so we were very, very careful at who we chose to give to.
You co-founded Amity Technology with your brother Brian in 1996. You are CEO of the company, and a lot of your work in the industry has to do with, as you mentioned, agricultural development in Russia and Ukraine. And I recently read an article about you and your work overseas, and some of your motivation, or at least I guess a lot of your motivation at various times, had to do with essentially wanting to feed the world with some of the agricultural endeavors that you were involved with. Talk about that a little bit in terms of that desire to impact food supplies and to make a difference in the lives of people when it comes to something as simple and as basic as simply eating and surviving.
Well, I'll give you a very tangible project right now. Eastern Ukraine, where all the war is going on. Historically, in Russia, Ukraine, a lot of the food supply came from big gardens. And so a lot of people would have a 1-acre garden, and then they would store the food in an underground storage area until the coming harvest. But whether it was potatoes or carrots, just a number of things they'd raise, and then they store them. Big shortage of garden seeds getting into eastern Ukraine. So I've been involved with a group, and we've raised close to $50,000 to buy garden seeds and to give them to the poorest of the poor in eastern Ukraine so they can plant their gardens. And it's been a pretty exciting project the last month. And so that'd be an example of the sort of thing that I guess gets me excited.
And that's just one small thing as you mentioned compared to the numerous projects that you've been involved with over the years. When you hear about and see and get updates on what has transpired in this war between Russia and Ukraine over the past, 4 years roughly now, what comes to heart?
I chair the board of a large Ukrainian company called Astarta. We have 600,000 acres of farmland and 5 sugar factories, soybean processing. We've had 51 employees who have gone into the Army have been killed. So it's very real. It's close to my heart. I have lots of friends in Russia that feel totally immobilized. They can't say anything. If they say anything, there can be punishment to their children. Now, are there Russians who champion Putin? Yes, there are. But most of the people I know just want the war to end. And history of warfare is what it is. And there's not many noble wars that you say that these were 2 really good people on each side that decided we had unavoidable conflict. But rather, there's almost always one person who's worse than others. And I am totally on the side of Ukraine in this. They were attacked, and Ukraine is a place where there's a lot more spiritual activity than Russia. There's a lot of healthy churches, growing churches, much different than Russia in that regard. And so I'm hoping, for the sake of a lot of young lives, that the war will end quickly.
Yeah, my condolences go to you and your colleagues with your ventures there overseas. It certainly is heartbreaking and distressing when we think about families and lives lost and young lives being impacted in this way. So I'm certainly empathetic toward you and everyone impacted by this tragic war that's happening. How is this going to impact or affect your giving and your involvement then moving forward in that part of the world, in Ukraine?
Well, number of relief efforts. Candidly, I've not given any money to any causes in Russia for quite a few years, and I shouldn't say that. There's some Mission Eurasia, which does work in that area, and working with some people who are working with young people in Russia. But by and large, I'm working with a number of people and helping, in a small way, the rebuilding of Ukraine after the war. What can we do?
And thank you for allowing me to ask you a little bit about that. I appreciate it. Coming back here, domestically, at least when we're talking with business owners and industry leaders here in the metro, you obviously have a long history of documented success in the business world. How would you describe kind of the role and the relationship of giving and philanthropy when it comes to running a successful business? Is there a relationship there or an interplay between the two?
I'm going to clarify one thing you said, a long history of documented success. There's an equal documentation of failures and big challenges. And I would say both my grandfather started the Bobcat Company, my dad, myself, there have been equal numbers of failures with successes. And
I appreciate your humility. That's one of the most admirable qualities about you, Howard, I have to say.
So connection between success, I think only God knows that. I know some really nasty people that are very, very successful, and some of them do give to this university or that to get their name on a building or whatever. I I think there's principles of hard work and vision and being a good listener to your team, to your customers, that are ingredients of success. But I'll go to my dad's company, Steiger Tractor. It did everything so well. But the four-wheel drive tractor market was 15,000 tractors per year in 1981. By 1986, it was 5,000 tractors per year. There's nothing that they could have done, to continue manufacturing tractors when you had 1 year's supply out at dealers' lots, and to keep running a factory when there's no demand. So there are places where even if you do everything really well, the circumstances just are, the headwinds are so severe against you. And during those times, and there's a lot of businesses that face this, particularly in cyclical businesses. So, but I always think that 2 Corinthians 8 and 9 are models of teaching on giving. And Paul's not really trying to shame the Corinthians, but he talks about the Macedonians out of their poverty were giving. And when Jesus talks about the widow who puts in, the widow's mite, and the others who are blowing the horns and saying, look at all the money we're giving, and Jesus says they've given more. And so one of the delicate things in thinking about stewardship, if you allow yourself to be known as a giver, you're in a way defeating the teaching of Jesus. Let your giving be in secret, and yet on the other hand, we're to let our light shine. And so it's a balance, and it all gets to the motive of your heart. Why do I give? And if it's to get the applause of others, to get my name on a building, that's all wrong.
Yeah.
But if I'm giving to the Lord with the awareness that this giving may be an encouragement to others, I think that's the balance that you have to maintain all the time.
Thank you for that. Luke 6:38 says, "Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." Has this been your experience over the years?
Yes and no.
And I hope you don't mind me asking the question.
No, that's a tough one. And here's where you get the borderline of why do I give? If some people say, I'm going to give so I get a lot more back, that's all wrong. So if I take that passage and make it a health and wealth gospel message, it's not the right way to go.
Yeah.
However, it just so happens, and I'm thinking of a couple families right now who have been unbelievably generous even during the difficult times, maintain that generosity as they accumulated a lot of wealth and still live very, very simply. I was with a person recently who lives in a very simple condominium in Florida, but he could go to the beach, and the towers that have 32 condominiums, he could own all 32 of those, but he chooses to live where he does because generosity and giving is central to everything about him. So I see models of people, and in that case, I think God has honored his life of faithfulness. So
That's wonderful. You've heard, of course, the phrase, we live in the best of times, we live in the worst of times. And lately we're hearing frequently words like transition, change, upheaval, economic uncertainty, reset. With uncertainty, with where we're at right now as a culture, a society, a country, a world, I think it could cause some people to have doubts or be fearful about the future or what lies ahead. And maybe that might cause some people to maybe question their giving or maybe rein in their giving a little bit. What's your perspective on that, and what thoughts might you have for people who have those fears and uncertainties?
Well, there's some truth in that. If I'm every circumstance is different, but if I'm a person who's, let's say my life is based on sales commissions, and I'm selling sugar beet harvesters, and my market is down 50% from what it was a year ago, and my export market is down 80%. And I've had this level of giving. Some people have this, they call it a faith promise gift. And so you have no idea where the money's going to come from, but you make a gift. I know it has worked for some people, but I also know a number of people who have made a pledge to give without a realistic expectation where the money's going. So I maybe don't have enough faith on that, but when I make a pledge to any cause, I need to know that if everything fell apart and I'd have no income, I still could meet that pledge. Mm-hmm. So in my case, I have a donor advised fund that is going to support any commitments I make, but been in too many organizations where people make pledges that sometimes are crazy and then just can't fulfill the pledge. And so I think careful fundraisers and careful development directors want to make sure that these are, and I've been involved in a number of these campaigns, mm-hmm. just how confident are we mm-hmm. in these commitments. So I've been to some Christian gatherings where they focus on this faith. You have no idea how you're going to make this gift, but maybe you want to make by far the biggest gift, and then trust God to bring in that gift. And I know it has worked for some people, mm-hmm. but I've seen just the opposite. And so in uncertainty, if I've got 4 kids and and I think my income's going to be 50% a year from now because my sales commissions are going to be way down, I'm going to think differently about mm-hmm. it. God has given us a mind and wisdom to make sure that when we make a commitment, we can carry through on that commitment.
What advice do you have for someone who wants to give, and who maybe they're not familiar with giving, but they want to give well and they want to give effectively? What advice or recommendations would you have really to anyone, whether they have a limited amount of resources or whether they have significant capacity?
Well, if they're a follower of Christ, I think above all, Lord, you promised to give wisdom. Obviously, if we're in a church, our first giving is to our church. But some people just have so much wealth that if they gave 10% of their income to the church, it would be double the total church budget. So this idea that, and there's nothing in the Bible that says you give 10% to your local church. In fact, all the teaching on tithing in my mind, tithing, the 10% is sort of a starting point for most people. And that's where I love this book, Stewards, Not Owners. If I look at my money as God's and I need an allowance from Him, versus if I give 10% to God, then everything else is mine and I do whatever I want with the rest. It's just 2 different ways of looking at it. So when you think about a philosophy of stewardship and starting to give, I think you need to have a heart for what you're giving to. And we love supporting evangelists. We love supporting missionaries who really are taking the gospel to places where we can't possibly go. And so, for instance, Sat-7, television and radio broadcast into Iran, they estimate close to 1 million Iranians have come to faith in Christ, through this ministry. And right now there's Hope with God, which is part, and to correct, I'm no longer on the Louis Plow board. I was on for many years.
Okay.
My last meeting was December. I got too old and they had to kick me off.
Oh, come on.
So, but they have a ministry called Hope with God, Internet Evangelism, and they're seeing loads and loads of Egyptians coming to faith in Christ regularly. Mm-hmm. And so, if your heart is in evangelism and missions and you can't go someplace, where's my heart and where do I want to be involved? Mm-hmm. And then you feel part of the team. And I think that's the most important thing for a giver. I want to feel a part of the team of the person who's mm-hmm. doing the work. And so if I'm giving to Capstone, I want to feel part of what's happening here with mm-hmm. the lives of students.
Yeah, and we're very grateful again for that. We've touched upon a number of topics and subjects here. Anything else that we haven't touched upon that you think is important to mention or include when it comes to philanthropy, stewardship, giving, any other points?
Oh, I think we've covered a lot.
Yes, we have.
So I've mentioned it all the times, and in fact, I did an hour phone call with the school board of a classical Christian school in another city who just wanted to talk about things. And so when it comes to stewardship, if I were a pastor on Sunday morning, I would say the same thing every Sunday. God loves a cheerful giver. God's not a beggar. If you cannot give cheerfully, keep your money in your pocket. And I think to delight the heart of God, we need to give cheerfully. And to give cheerfully, we need to believe in the cause in which we're giving to.
Well, it's a great way to sum it all up. It's been such a pleasure. Again, I've been speaking with Howard Dahl, a great friend of Capstone, a wonderful Jesus follower, a Christ follower here in the Metro. I, among many other people, are just incredibly grateful for all that you've done, not only for Capstone, but for all that you've done for our region, our country, and the world. So thank you so much for everything you've done.
Thanks,
appreciate
Tom.
it. Yeah, God bless. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.